My parents' lawyer looked me straight in the eye and said, "Your brother gets the $850,000. You get the $74,000 debt." Everyone at the table waited for me to break, but the moment I saw the paperwork they wanted me to sign, something inside me snapped. My name is Amelia, and I'm 39 years old. For as long as I can remember, I've been the family's designated adult, the responsible one, the fixer. While my younger brother Leo was the golden child, charming his way through life and leaving a trail of broken promises and unpaid bills, I was the one with the stable career, the perfect credit score, and the perpetually open wallet. Our family dynamic was a carefully constructed pyramid. My parents were at the top, basking in the glow of their perceived success. Leo was just beneath them, the heir apparent, his every whim indulged, his every mistake erased. And I was the foundation, unseen, unthanked, but bearing all the weight. I was the one who co-signed for Leo's first car, a gleaming sports coupe he crashed within 6 months. I was the one who paid the emergency room bill when he got into a bar fight in college. I was the one who loaned my parents $20,000 for a new roof, money I knew I'd never see again, while Leo was taking a 3-week cultural tour of Bali, funded entirely by them. Every time, the justification was the same. "You're just so good with money, Amelia," my mother would say, her voice laced with a sweet, manipulative helplessness. "Leo's still finding himself," my father would add, with a proud clap on my brother's shoulder. "He's a creative spirit. You're the practical one." Practical was their code word for workhorse. Responsible was their euphemism for doormat. After they passed away in a sudden, tragic car accident, the dynamic didn't change, it intensified. The grief was real, a hollow ache in my chest. But for my extended family, their sympathy was a thin veneer over their true priority, ensuring the family's wealth and image remained intact. This meant propping up Leo, now the new patriarch in their eyes. The first hint of the storm to come arrived a week before the will reading. My Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, cornered me in the kitchen of my parents' sprawling, eerily quiet house. The air was thick with the scent of wilting funeral lilies and lemon polish. She placed a cool, dry hand on my arm. "Amelia, dear, we all know how much you've done for your parents, for the family." I waited. With Aunt Carol, the preamble was always the most dangerous part. "Your brother, he's going to need a lot of support now," she continued, her eyes scanning the expensive granite countertops as if assessing their value. He's not practical like you." There it was again, that word. "I'm sure he'll manage," I said, my voice flatter than I intended. Aunt Carol's smile was tight. "Of course, but the transition, it will be a lot for him to handle. The estate, the finances, it's a heavy burden for such a sensitive soul." I thought of Leo, who spent the day after the funeral on the phone with a realtor, asking about the market value of waterfront properties. Sensitive wasn't the word I would have chosen. "We're all just counting on you to help him through it," she finished, giving my arm a final proprietary pat, "to do the right thing." The right thing. I was beginning to understand that in my family, the right thing was whatever cost me the most and benefited Leo the most. I just didn't realize how high the price was about to be. The day of the will reading was a masterclass in passive aggression. It was held in the offices of Sterling and Finch, a law firm so old and prestigious it probably had its own coat of arms. The air smelled of money and condescension. My Uncle Robert was there, a silent, imposing figure standing behind my aunt's chair, his presence a form of masculine endorsement for whatever she was about to say. Leo was dressed in a suit that was a little too sharp, a little too new. He looked less like a grieving son and more like a man about to close a big deal. He avoided my gaze, focusing instead on a point just over Mr. Sterling's shoulder, a picture of feigned solemnity. And then the words came. $850,000 for Leo, a $74,000 debt. Silence descended. It was so absolute I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning, the ticking of a grandfather clock in the hall. My own heartbeat pounded in my ears, a frantic, panicked drum. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. It wasn't just the money, it was the sheer, breathtaking cruelty of it. A final, posthumous slap in the face. They hadn't just forgotten me, they had punished me. Punished me for my competence, for my reliability. They had taken my greatest strengths and turned them into a liability. Leo was the first to speak. He let out a theatrical sigh, a performance of reluctant acceptance. He turned to me, his expression a carefully crafted mask of pity. Wow, Ames, I don't know what to say. I had no idea they were in that kind of trouble. The lie was so bald-faced, so insulting, it stole the air from my lungs. He knew, of course he knew. He was the trouble. My voice came out as a strangled whisper. $74,000? Mr. Sterling adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses, refusing to meet my eyes. He looked at a file on his desk. It appears to be a consolidation of several unsecured loans and credit card balances. Your parents were very private about their financial difficulties. Difficulties? I repeated, the word tasting like ash. They owned their house outright. They had a pension. The investment portfolio. The portfolio is now Leo's, Aunt Carol interjected, her voice sharp and definitive. And we don't speak ill of the dead, Amelia. Your parents made their wishes clear. Their wishes? I finally found my voice, a tremor of pure, unadulterated rage running through it. Their wish was to saddle me with a debt that isn't even mine? Leo scoffed, dropping the mask of sympathy. The real Leo, the entitled, arrogant boy I'd known my whole life, was back. Oh, here we go. Don't be so emotional, Amelia. It's just numbers on a page. You're the one who's good with this stuff. You'll figure it out. Figure it out? I looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw a stranger, a predator wearing my brother's face. You inherit nearly $1 million, and I'm supposed to figure out how to pay off a debt the size of a down payment on a house? Uncle Robert stepped forward, his shadow falling over me. Your parents trusted you, Amelia. They knew you were the responsible one, the one who could handle this. You should be grateful for the chance to honor their memory by settling their affairs. Grateful. The word was a punch to the gut. Grateful for being treated like a servant? Grateful for being punished for my own success? Mr. Sterling slid a thin sheaf of papers across the polished mahogany table towards me. A gold pen lay beside it. If you'll just sign here, he said, his voice smooth as silk. This document is a formal acceptance of the terms of the will and an acknowledgement of the debt transfer. It's a simple formality to close out the estate. My hand trembled as I reached for the papers. My mind was a fog of shock and grief and white-hot anger. I felt a crushing pressure from everyone in the room. Sign it. Be the good daughter. Be the responsible one. Clean up the mess one last time. I read the first line. I, Amelia Gable, hereby accept the terms and conditions outlined in the last will and testament. My eyes scanned down the page, past the legal jargon, and then I saw it, a single clause buried in a dense paragraph at the bottom of page 2. And in doing so, I waive any and all current or future claims to the property located at 1428 Willow Creek Lane. My parents' house, the family home, the single biggest asset, which I had just assumed was part of the $850,000 Leo was inheriting. They weren't just making me take the debt, they were making me sign away any possible claim to the house, a legal maneuver to ensure my brother's inheritance was ironclad, protected from any challenge I might mount. It wasn't a formality, it was a trap. I looked up from the papers, my gaze locking with Mr. Sterling's. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Not pity, not professionalism. It was a cold, calculating wariness. He knew exactly what that clause meant. He had put it there. "I need to read this more carefully," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Leo laughed, a short barking sound. "What's there to read? It's legal mumbo-jumbo. Just sign it, Amelia, so we can get out of here. I have a meeting with a designer at the house this afternoon." A designer? He was already redecorating. While I was being handed a bill for their debts, he was picking out new curtains. "No," I said. The word was small, but it landed in the silent room like a stone. Aunt Carol's face hardened. "Don't be difficult, Amelia. This is what your parents wanted." "How do you know that?" I shot back, my spine stiffening. "Were you there when they wrote it? Did they tell you they planned on making me pay for Leo's mistakes my entire life, and even after their deaths?" "That's enough," Uncle Robert's voice boomed. "You're hysterical." I slowly, deliberately pushed the papers back across the table. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I won't be signing anything today," I said, my voice shaking but firm. I looked at each of them, my smug brother, my cold-hearted aunt and uncle, the duplicitous lawyer. They weren't a family, they were a board of directors, and I had just been unceremoniously fired. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Sterling," I said, the formal words dripping with ice. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." I turned and walked out of the office, not looking back. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind me, and for the first time in my life, I felt the satisfying snap of a lock turning, not on a cage I was trapped in, but on a door I was choosing to close myself. The war had just begun. The days that followed were a blur of suffocating pressure. My phone became a weapon used against me. Voicemails from Aunt Carol, her voice shifting from saccharine disappointment to shrill indignation. "Amelia, I am just so hurt by your behavior. After all your parents did for you, to be so ungrateful. Your refusal to cooperate is holding everything up. Leo can't move forward until you sign. Do you want to tarnish your parents' memory with this bitterness?" Then came the texts from Leo. They were a stream of casual cruelty designed to get under my skin. "Designer says the kitchen is a total gut job. Can't believe Mom and Dad lived with those hideous cabinets. Just met with the landscaper. Going to rip out Mom's rose bushes. They're blocking the view. Seriously, Ames, when are you signing? My realtor is getting antsy. The market is hot right now." He was treating me not as a sister, but a bureaucratic obstacle, a piece of paperwork standing between him and his payday. The family home, the place where I grew up, where every corner held a memory, was just a line item on his balance sheet, an asset to be liquidated. I went back to the house to pack my things. I had kept a room there, my childhood bedroom, filled with books and old photographs. It was my anchor to the past. Now it felt like enemy territory. As I walked through the front door, I was hit with the sterile chemical smell of an industrial cleaner. The furniture in the living room was covered in white sheets, like ghosts of a life that was already over. In the center of the room, Leo was talking to a man in a crisp suit, the realtor. "And with a few cosmetic updates, we're confident we can list it at the top of the market. The location is prime," the realtor was saying, his voice echoing in the empty space. Leo saw me, and his face soured. "Oh, it's you." I came to pack my things, I said, my voice tight. Try to be quick about it, he said, waving a dismissive hand. We're having the carpets professionally cleaned tomorrow, and I don't want your dusty boxes in the way. I walked past him without a word, my suitcase bumping against the wall. The sound was unnaturally loud. I went up the familiar staircase, my hand trailing along the banister my father had carved himself. The sting of tears pricked my eyes, but I forced them back. Crying was a luxury I couldn't afford. Emotion was the weapon they used against me. Don't be so emotional, Leo had said. He was right. Emotion was a liability. From now on, I would be cold. I would be strategic. In my room, I found more evidence of his conquest. A roll of blue painter's tape was on my nightstand. He had already marked the walls he wanted to tear down. My bookshelf, filled with novels I'd collected since I was a teenager, had a yellow sticky note on it, junk, dispose. He wasn't just erasing our parents, he was erasing me. I worked methodically, packing my life into cardboard boxes. Each photo, each book was a small paper cut to the heart. There was a picture of me at my college graduation, my parents on either side, beaming with pride, or so I had thought. Now, I wondered if they were just proud of the investment, the future earning potential I represented, the family safety net. As I was emptying my closet, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. This is Sarah from Premier Bank. We're calling regarding the outstanding balance on the Gable account. Please call us back at your earliest convenience to discuss payment options. It had already started. The debt collectors. They hadn't wasted any time. Mr. Sterling must have forwarded them my name as the new point of contact, even though I hadn't signed a thing. It was another pressure tactic, an attempt to scare me into compliance. My blood ran cold. How deep did this go? How had my parents, who lived a life of comfortable upper-middle-class luxury, racked up $74,000 in secret debt? They weren't gamblers. They didn't live extravagantly, beyond what their pensions and my father's modest investments could support. It didn't add up. That night, back in my small city apartment, surrounded by boxes that smelled like my childhood, I became a detective. Fueled by coffee and a growing sense of dread, I turned my living room into a war room. I didn't have access to their bank accounts, but I had something better. 15 years of my own financial records. I was meticulous. I had spreadsheets tracking every major expense, every loan I'd ever given. I cross-referenced dates, amounts, and my own bank statements. The first pattern emerged around midnight, a series of large cash withdrawals from my own savings account, all coinciding with panicked phone calls from my mother. Leo's rent is late again, honey. The landlord is threatening eviction. Click. $2,500 withdrawn. Leo's car needs a new transmission. He can't get to his job interviews without it. Click. $3,800 withdrawn. Leo has a little bit of credit card trouble. He's so upset. He just needs a clean slate. Click. $7,000 withdrawn. It was all there, in black and white. A slow, steady drain on my own financial future, all to patch the holes in Leo's sinking ship. But these were my own funds. This didn't explain the $74,000 debt my parents had left me. The breakthrough came at 3 a.m. I was scrolling through old emails, searching for keywords, loan, payment, help. I found a chain from 3 years ago, an email from my father. Subject, family matter. Amelia, your mother and I have decided to help Leo consolidate some of his outstanding obligations. We've taken out a personal loan to give him a fresh start. It's all handled. Don't worry about it. My heart hammered against my ribs. I searched my sent folder and found my reply. Dad, are you sure that's a good idea? How much? Can you afford the payments? His response was swift and dismissive. It's not for you to worry about. We have it under control. This is what parents do. We've used the house as collateral, so it's perfectly safe. It's a home equity line of credit. The house. the house he knew was his pride and joy, the one he always said would be the family's legacy. He had leveraged it to pay for Leo's irresponsibility. But the amount, the email didn't say. I kept digging. 10 minutes later, I found it, an accidentally forwarded email. My mother had sent me a flight confirmation for a family trip, but she had forgotten to delete the previous message in the chain. It was from a bank manager at Premier Bank. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Gable, this email confirms the activation of your home equity line of credit, account number ending in 8452, for the amount of $75,000. There it was, $75,000. The numbers were almost identical. This wasn't some mysterious collection of credit card bills. This was one single debt, a loan taken out against the family home to bail Leo out of a hole so deep he couldn't climb out of it himself. And they had left it to me. They hadn't just left me their debt. They had left Leo's debt. The injustice of it was a physical blow. I felt a wave of nausea. All those years, I had been the family's bank. When my own funds ran dry, they had leveraged their largest asset, and their final act was to make me, the one who had always paid, the one who had always sacrificed, personally responsible for the bill. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face. The shock was beginning to fade, replaced by something new, a cold, hard clarity. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about the truth. My family had built a narrative around Leo's charm and my responsibility. They had sold it to me my entire life. But the narrative was a lie. The foundation of our family wasn't love or loyalty. It was a complex financial shell game designed to protect the golden child at all costs. And I had just found the ledger. The next morning, I was back at the house. Leo was gone, probably meeting with his army of designers and realtors. The house was quiet, holding its breath. I wasn't there to pack, I was there to hunt. My father was a man of habit and paranoia. He trusted banks, but he didn't trust them completely. He kept paper copies of everything important. He had a large, imposing oak desk in his study, a room I had rarely been allowed into as a child. It was his sanctuary. The desk was locked. Of course it was. I remembered watching him once, years ago, when he thought no one was looking. He had fumbled with a book on the shelf behind him. I scanned the titles: Dickens, Twain, Hemingway, and then a thick, leather-bound volume, The Complete Works of Marcus Aurelius. My father loved the Stoics. He fancied himself a philosopher king. I pulled the book from the shelf. It was heavier than it should have been. The back cover was loose. I pried it open. Inside, a small, ornate brass key was nestled in a hollowed-out compartment. My hand was shaking as I inserted the key into the desk lock. It turned with a satisfying click. The inside of the desk was a time capsule of my family's financial life. Neat folders labeled in my father's precise architectural handwriting. Taxes 2010, appliance warranties, pension statements. I bypassed them all, looking for something specific. My fingers brushed against a thick, dark green folder tucked at the very back. The label was simple: estate. My breath caught in my throat. I pulled it out and opened it on the desk. The first document on top was a recent one, a signed agreement with Sterling and Finch, outlining their fees for estate management. Tucked behind it, I found a copy of the will. It was exactly as Mr. Sterling had read. My brother's name, the $850,000, my name, the debt. It was all there, signed by my parents just 6 months ago. My heart sank. It felt so final. But my father was a pack rat. He never threw anything away. I kept digging deeper into the folder. I found older versions of their will, drafts with crossed-out lines and notes in the margins. In one from 10 years ago, the estate was to be split 50-50. In one from... The papers in the folder were brittle, the ink slightly faded. They were ghosts of a life I thought I'd known. The top document was a will dated 10 years prior. I unfolded it with a reverence that felt misplaced, my fingers tracing the elegant, looping signature of my mother and the sharp, decisive scrawl of my father. My breath caught. Item 3, all real and personal property, including the primary residence at 124 Willow Creek Lane, as well as all liquid assets, investment portfolios, and personal effects, shall be divided in equal shares between our beloved children, Amelia Rose Davies and Leo Michael Davies. Equal shares. The words landed in the silent room like a stone dropped into a deep well. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. It had been their intention. For years, for a decade. I was not the afterthought. I was the other half. I sank back into my father's worn leather chair, the cracked hide groaning under my weight. A fresh wave of grief, sharp and acidic, washed over me, not for their loss, but for this loss, the loss of a truth I never even knew I had. I dug deeper into the folder. There was another will, dated 5 years ago. The language was almost identical, the distribution of the estate still perfectly, beautifully 50-50. I was the co-executor alongside Leo. We were meant to be partners, equals in closing the final chapter of our parents' lives. The family wasn't a pyramid with Leo at the apex and me as the foundation. It was a structure built on 2 pillars. Or it was supposed to be. I wasn't just a supporting column. I was the bedrock they had decided to dynamite at the last possible second. The most recent document in the folder, tucked behind the old wills, wasn't a will at all. It was a thick packet of stapled pages, printed on modern, bright white paper that seemed to mock the aged vellum of the others. The header read, Home Equity Line of Credit Agreement. My heart began to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I scanned the details. The lender, the principal amount, $75,000, and the date. It was dated 7 months ago, 6 months before their accident. 6 months before they had walked into Mr. Sterling's office and signed my name onto a bill for a lifetime of loyalty. It didn't add up. No, that was a lie I used to tell myself to make their behavior palatable.
It added up perfectly. I just hadn't been willing to do the math. I carefully placed the documents back in the folder, slid it into my oversized tote bag, and locked the desk. The click of the lock was a sound of finality. I was no longer a daughter mourning in her childhood home. The house was no longer a home. It was a crime scene, and I had just found the ledger. I walked through the rooms, the furniture still draped in their ghostly white sheets, and let myself out, locking the front door behind me. I didn't look back. My small apartment, once a sanctuary from the chaos of my family, had been converted. The living room had been a museum of their lives. My apartment was now a war room. I cleared my coffee table and laid out the evidence. The new will, a copy grudgingly provided by Sterling's office. The old wills, the HELOC agreement. For years, my role as the practical one meant I was the family's unpaid financial advisor, bookkeeper, and crisis manager. They praised my meticulous nature when it served them, when I was untangling Leo's credit card disasters or navigating the bureaucracy of my father's insurance claims. Now, I would turn that weaponized practicality on them. I opened my laptop and created a new spreadsheet, columns for dates, events, transactions, and notes. I started building a timeline, a meticulous reconstruction of my parents' final year. The HELOC was taken out in April. The new will was signed in May. The accident was in October. The sequence was stark, brutal. I spent the next 2 days in a self-imposed exile, fueled by black coffee and cold fury. I cross-referenced the HELOC agreement with my own records, the frantic calls from my mother, the vague mentions of Leo's latest brilliant venture, a high-risk tech startup that promised revolutionary returns. I remembered my father's weary voice on the phone. "We're handling it, Amelia. Your brother just needs a little bridge funding." It wasn't bridge funding, it was a bailout. They had leveraged the family home, the very asset meant to be my inheritance, to paper over Leo's catastrophic failure. And then, a month later, they had rewritten their will to ensure that when the bill for their indulgence came due, it would land squarely on my desk, not his. The $74,000 debt wasn't a collection of miscellaneous expenses. It was the HELOC. They had left me the loan and left him the house that secured it. It was a work of diabolical, transactional genius. On the third evening, just as I was tracing the wire transfer information from the HELOC disbursement to an LLC I quickly discovered was registered to Leo, my apartment buzzer shrieked. It was a piercing, ugly sound that shattered the focused silence. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the intercom, my hand hovering over the button. "Yes?" A smooth, familiar voice oozed through the speaker, thick with saccharine concern. "Amelia, darling, it's Aunt Carol. Robert is with me. We were just in the neighborhood and we're so worried. Can we come up for a moment?" They were not just in the neighborhood. My aunt's territory was a manicured suburb 40 miles away. They were enforcers sent by the family's board of directors to handle a rogue asset. "It's not a good time, Carol," I said, my voice flat.
"Oh, don't be silly. We won't stay long. We just need to talk." The unspoken threat hung in the air. We will have this conversation one way or another. I buzzed them in. I had a choice: face them on my own terms, in my own space, or have them ambush me later. This was better. I stood by the door, not moving to welcome them further in as they emerged from the elevator. Aunt Carol, dressed in a tasteful beige pantsuit that screamed quiet money, swept in first, her face a mask of practiced sympathy. Uncle Robert followed, a large, silent man whose presence was a physical weight. He nodded at me, his expression unreadable, and positioned himself by the door like a guard. "Oh, Amelia," Carol began, her eyes sweeping over my Spartan apartment with a flicker of disdain before landing on the papers spread across my coffee table. "You look exhausted. This whole ordeal, it's been so hard on you." She reached out to touch my arm. I stepped back. It was a small movement, but it landed in the room with the force of a slammed door. Her hand dropped. The smile on her face tightened. "We spoke to Mr. Sterling," she said, her tone shifting from concerned to businesslike. "He mentioned you haven't signed the acceptance forms. He's very concerned. We're all very concerned." "Are you?" I asked. My voice was colder than I intended, and it felt wonderful. Carol's painted-on smile faltered. "Of course, we're family. And as family, we think it's best to settle these things quickly, quietly, for your parents' memory." "My parents' memory?" I repeated, the words tasting like ash. "Their memory is a bill for $74,000? Did they tell you that part, Carol? Or did they just mention that they were providing for me?" Uncle Robert shifted his weight. Carol's expression hardened, the faux sympathy melting away to reveal the sanctimonious steel beneath. "Your parents did what they thought was best," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Leo, you know how he is. He's a sensitive soul. He isn't equipped to handle these practical matters. Your parents knew you were the strong one, the responsible one. This was their way of trusting you to do the right thing." There it was, the same tired script. Leo the dreamer, Amelia the workhorse. He got the assets, I got the responsibilities. They weren't just leaving me their debt, they were leaving me his too. "The right thing," I said.
looking from her duplicitous face to Robert's stoic one, is for Leo to take responsibility for the money he borrowed. Carol let out a shrill little laugh of indignation. Borrowed? Amelia? That's not fair. Your parents gave him that money. It was a gift. The debt is a separate matter. It's the estate's debt, and they left it to you. No, I said. The word was quiet, but it echoed in the tense space between us. Carol stared at me, her mouth slightly agape. I had never said no to them, not once in my 39 years. No, she finally sputtered. What do you mean, no? I mean, I will not be paying for Leo's failed startup. I will not be signing Mr. Sterling's papers. And I will not be doing the right thing to protect a system that was designed to exploit me. I walked to my coffee table and picked up the HELOC agreement. This debt belongs to Leo, morally and financially, and I have the proof. I held it up. Carol squinted at it, comprehension slowly dawning on her face, followed by a flash of pure panic. She looked at Robert, who finally spoke, his voice a low rumble. This is a family matter, Amelia. You're going to make a mess. Good, I said, turning my gaze back to Carol. They handed me a bill for a lifetime of service. It's time I handed them a receipt for their betrayal. I walked to the door and held it open. The message was clear. They were debt collectors for the family's emotional ledger, and I was officially insolvent. Carol, for the first time in her life, was speechless. She gave me one last look, a mixture of fury and disbelief, and then swept past me out the door, Robert trailing in her wake like a thundercloud. The door clicked shut, a period at the end of a sentence I should have written years ago. I leaned against it, the adrenaline starting to fade, replaced by a crystalline, unshakable resolve. They had declared war in a cavernous wood-paneled office. I was accepting the terms in the hallway of my fourth-floor walk-up. I went back to my laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I wasn't just looking up information anymore. I was looking for a weapon. My family had Mr. Sterling, a man who smelled of old money and moral compromise. I needed his opposite. I needed someone who saw the law not as a set of traditions to be upheld, but as a set of tools to be wielded. I wasn't looking for a peacemaker. I was looking for a shark. The quiet of my apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a war room. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was tactical. The stack of documents on my dining table, the damning HELOC agreement, the copies of my father's older wills, the saccharine condolence card from Aunt Carol, was my arsenal. My parents had handed me a bill for a lifetime of loyalty. I was about to hand them a receipt for their betrayal. There was no more grief, only a glacial calm that had settled deep in my bones. The shock had burned away, leaving behind the hard, unyielding bedrock of my resolve. I had spent my life as the family's fixer, the quiet architect of their stability. Now, I would use those same skills to deconstruct the corrupt structure they had built on my back. My first move wasn't emotional, it was strategic. I didn't weep or rage. I opened my laptop. Mr. Sterling was a relic, a creature of the old money establishment that protected its own. He was a pillar of the system that had crushed me. I needed the opposite. I needed a hammer. For 3 hours, I dove into the world of probate litigation in my city. I cross-referenced legal journals, court records, and client testimonials, my fingers flying across the keyboard with a familiar, meticulous rhythm. I wasn't looking for a sympathetic ear or a polished brand. I was hunting for a shark. I searched for names associated with phrases like aggressive challenger, will contests, and breach of fiduciary duty. I dismissed the large, mahogany-paneled firms whose websites featured smiling, silver-haired partners. They were all just different versions of Sterling. Finally, I found her. Jessica Croft. Her picture was stark, a woman my age with sharp, intelligent eyes and a haircut that looked like it meant business. There was no soft-focused background, no forced smile. Her firm was small, her website minimalist, Her bio was a list of accomplishments, not platitudes. She specialized in complex estate disputes and held the record for the largest punitive damages awarded against an executor in the state. She was a weapon. I sent a concise email with the subject line, "Urgent consultation, contested will and executor malfeasance." She replied in 7 minutes, "My office, tomorrow, 10 a.m. Bring everything." Jessica Croft's office was nothing like Sterling's cavernous, condescending chamber. It was a high-floor corner unit with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city's steel and glass heart. The air was cool, smelling of espresso and ambition, not old paper and decay. The furniture was modern and functional, the only art a massive abstract canvas of chaotic black strokes on a white background. It looked like a declaration of war. Croft was even more formidable in person. She wore a tailored gray dress that was both stylish and severe. She didn't offer condolences or pleasantries. She gestured to a chair, took a seat opposite me at a sleek glass table, and said, "Walk me through it." Her voice was a controlled, low-pitched instrument of pure efficiency. I had rehearsed this. I laid out the documents in chronological order, my narration as dispassionate and precise as if I were presenting a quarterly financial report. I started with my lifelong role as the family's financial manager, detailing the bailouts for Leo, the co-signed loans I had quietly paid off, the management of my parents' retirement portfolio. I was building the foundation, establishing my value. Then I moved to the will reading. I described Sterling's polished drone, Aunt Carol's shrill indignation, Leo's dismissive texts. I placed the new will on the table. "Exhibit A," I said, the term feeling natural on my tongue. I slid the HELOC documents next to it. "Exhibit B," a $74,000 debt taken out 3 months before their accident, co-signed by my mother, who hadn't made a financial decision without my input in 20 years. I then presented the bank statements showing the exact amount wired to Leo's tech startup, a company that had dissolved 2 weeks later. The paper trail was undeniable. Finally, I produced the copies of the 3 previous wills from my father's desk, their edges brittle with age. And Exhibit C. Their intent, documented for over 15 years, was a 50-50 split. This final version was drafted 4 days after the HELOC was approved. I finished and sat back, my hands folded on the table. I had presented the facts, the cold, hard numbers of my own erasure. For a long moment, Croft said nothing. She simply stared at the documents, her sharp eyes scanning each page. The silence in the room was absolute, a holding of breath. I watched her, this stranger who now held the keys to my future. "They didn't just disinherit you, Miss Gable," she said at last, her voice a low hum. "They saddled you with their son's debt, assuming you'd be too responsible, too good to let it go to collections and ruin the family name." She tapped a perfectly manicured finger on the final will. "And this clause Sterling tried to get you to sign, the one waiving your claim to the house?" "Yes," I said. "That's not just boilerplate, that's a kill shot. He knew the HELOC was tied to the house. If you accepted the debt, the bank would come for its collateral. By waiving your claim, you'd be legally barred from fighting the foreclosure. Leo would get the house free and clear after the bank took its cut from the estate sale, and you'd be left with a deficiency judgment. It was a trap designed to strip you of everything." A visceral shudder went through me, but my expression remained impassive. Was Sterling in on it? "In on it is a hard thing to prove," Croft said, leaning back. Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw the predator beneath the professional surface. But he certainly breached his fiduciary duty. An ethical lawyer would have flagged this as potential elder manipulation, or at the very least, a case of profound undue influence. Leo pressures them for money, they take out a loan, and 4 days later they rewrite their entire legacy to make their other child pay for it? A first-year law student could see the red flags. Sterling chose to ignore them. Will make him regret that. The validation was so potent it was almost dizzying. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. This was as rotten as I thought it was. "So what's the play?" I asked, my voice steady. "We don't just contest the will," she said, a thin, dangerous smile touching her lips. "We go on the offensive. We file a petition to invalidate the will on grounds of undue influence by your brother and lack of testamentary capacity, arguing your parents were under extreme duress. Concurrently, we file a motion to have Leo's inheritance frozen pending the outcome. We'll subpoena his financial records, every last text message and email between him, your parents, and Sterling for the last year. We will put him under a microscope, so powerful it will burn." She paused, her gaze locking with mine. "This will be ugly, Miss Gable. Your family will paint you as a greedy, disgruntled daughter. They will use every tool they have, guilt, shame, public opinion, to break you. Are you ready for that?" I thought of Aunt Carol's cool, dry hand on my arm. I thought of my father's locked desk. I thought of Leo sunning himself on a pile of money my life's work had protected. "I was raised in that fire," I said. "They just don't know I'm fireproof." A buzz from my purse cut through the sterile air. I glanced at the screen. It was Leo. My hand didn't even shake as I silenced the call. A moment later, a text message appeared. "Leo, heard you're making things difficult. Don't be stupid, Amy. Just sign the papers. This is my money. Dad and Mom wanted me to have it. Don't ruin their memory with your little accounting project." My little accounting project. The condescension was so pure, so Leo. It was almost laughable. He saw my life's work, my pain, my very identity as a petty clerical task getting in his way. He wasn't just a golden child. He was a black hole, consuming everything around him with the gravitational pull of his own entitlement. I showed the text to Croft. She read it, and her smile widened. It was not a pleasant sight. It was the baring of teeth. "Excellent," she murmured, as if he had just handed her a gift. "He's arrogant, and he puts things in writing. I love that in an opponent." I looked from the phone, to the documents on the table, to the warrior sitting across from me. For 39 years, I had played by the rules of a game designed for me to lose. I had been practical. I had been responsible. I had done the right thing. No more. "Freeze his assets," I said, my voice as cold and clear as the glass table between us. "Start the discovery. I want to see the ledger." Jessica Croft nodded slowly, her eyes gleaming with predatory delight. Consider it done. The family business was officially in liquidation, and the war had just begun. The air in my apartment, usually a sanctuary of calm neutrality, was now charged with the electric hum of impending battle. Jessica Croft's parting words, "We go on the offensive," immediately reverberated in the quiet space. The meeting had been a baptism by fire, burning away the last vestiges of the dutiful daughter I had been, and forging something harder, sharper in her place. My living room was no longer a living room. It was a war room. My laptop was the command center, my phone the primary weapon. The first volley was fired before the sun set. An email from Jessica's office, crisp and lethally polite, informed me that the official notice of contest had been filed with the probate court. A petition to freeze all estate assets pending the outcome was attached. A separate, equally chilling email had been dispatched to Mr. Sterling, formally notifying him of my legal representation and putting him on notice for discovery. Reading the carbon copy, I felt a tremor of something that was equal parts fear and exhilaration. There was no going back.
The bridges to my old life, the one where I quietly absorbed every slight and paid every bill, were now pillars of smoke in my rearview mirror. The family's response was faster than I'd anticipated. It didn't come as a formal letter from Sterling's cavernous office or a petulant text from Leo. It came, as it always did, through the designated channel of emotional enforcement, Aunt Carol. My phone buzzed, her name flashing on the screen. For a moment, the old conditioning kicked in, the urge to answer, to placate, to manage her carefully curated feelings. I let it ring, a small act of defiance. It stopped, then immediately started again, more insistent this time. I took a breath, pressed the icon, and put the phone on speaker, placing it on the coffee table like a captured enemy device. "Amelia," she began, her voice a polished drone of saccharine disappointment. There was no greeting. She dispensed with such pleasantries when she was on a mission. "I just received a very distressing call from Robert. He spoke with Mr. Sterling." "I'm sure you did," I said. My voice was flat, a stranger's voice even to me. A pause. My lack of immediate capitulation had clearly disrupted her script. "Amelia, what do you think you're doing? A lawsuit? You're tearing this family apart over money." The accusation was so perfectly, predictably manipulative, it was almost a work of art. The family was torn apart the moment my parents decided their son's comfort was worth more than their daughter's future, I replied, my eyes fixed on the legal filing on my laptop screen. "This isn't about money, Carol. This is about a bill I was handed for a lifetime of loyalty. I'm simply refusing to pay it." Her indignation went shrill. "A bill? Your parents loved you. They provided for you." "They co-signed a loan that is now my sole responsibility while leaving my brother nearly $1 million in liquid assets. That isn't love, Carol. That's a business transaction where I was the collateral." The metaphors, once just thoughts in my head, were now my language. I was speaking the truth of our family structure, and she couldn't stand it. "You're being hysterical and selfish. Leo is sensitive. He always has been. He's devastated by all this. He looked up to you." I almost laughed. Leo had never looked up to me. He had looked down on me from the pedestal my parents had built for him. If Leo is devastated, he can call me himself, but he won't, because he knows what he did, and I think you do too. The line went quiet, but it was a heavy, furious silence. I could picture her perfectly, standing in her immaculate kitchen, her hand gripping the phone, her face a tight mask of controlled rage. She was the board member of a corrupt corporation whose dirty accounting was about to be exposed. "Your mother would be ashamed of you," she finally whispered, the ultimate weapon in her arsenal. The old Amelia would have shattered, but the old Amelia was gone. "My mother," I said, my voice dropping to a cold, quiet register, "signed a document that treated me like garbage. If she's ashamed, she has every right to be. We're done here, Carol." I ended the call before she could respond. The silence that followed was profound. I hadn't yelled, I hadn't cried, I had simply stated the facts. I had taken her passive aggression, her emotional blackmail, and refused to accept delivery. It felt like the first clean breath I had taken in 20 years. 2 days later, armed with a copy of the court filing and a letter from Jessica asserting my rights as a potential heir, I drove to my parents' house. The 2-story colonial, once a symbol of suffocating obligation, now looked different. It was no longer just a house, it was a crime scene. And I was no longer a grieving daughter. I was a forensic accountant. I let myself in with the key they had insisted I keep, the one meant for emergencies, for fixing a leaky pipe or letting in a repairman. The irony was a bitter pill. The air inside was stale and unnaturally still. Leo hadn't been back. The place was exactly as I'd left it after the initial shock, with furniture covered in white sheets like ghosts guarding forgotten secrets. The airy quiet was broken only by the hum of the refrigerator, a lonely, mechanical heartbeat in a house whose own heart had stopped. I bypassed the living room and went straight to my father's study. This had been his domain, a room of bark wood, leather-bound books he never read, and the faint, lingering scent of his aftershave.
It was the nerve center of their finances. If there was a paper trail detailing their descent into this catastrophic decision, it would be here. I was there to hunt. I started with the desk. The drawers were meticulously organized, a testament to my mother's influence. Bills in one, bank statements in another, investment portfolios in a third. I pulled the folders, laying them out on the floor, transforming the plush oriental rug into a grid of evidence. I worked backward through the bank statements, my eyes scanning for the $74,000 withdrawal from the HELOC. I found it, dated 6 months ago, a single, massive transfer. No explanation. Then I moved to the filing cabinet in the corner. It was old, metal, and locked, of course. My father was a man who believed in the theater of security. I remembered watching him fiddle with the key, which he kept on a separate small ring. I checked the top desk drawer again, pushing my hand all the way to the back, past paper clips and old pens. My fingers brushed against cold metal. I pulled out the small ring with a single tiny key. The lock clicked open with a satisfying thud. The files inside were older, less organized. Tax returns from a decade ago, old car titles, appliance warranties. It was the family's archival memory. I pulled the folders one by one, my pulse a steady, determined drum. In the very back, behind a thick folder labeled pensions, was a slim manila folder with no label at all. It felt out of place, deliberately hidden. My breath caught. I sat back on my heels and opened it. It wasn't one document. It was a story told in paper. The first page was a loan application for the HELOC. In the purpose of loan section, my father had written in his spidery, impatient script, "Personal investment, a lie." Beneath it was a series of printed out bank statements from an account I didn't recognize. It was Leo's. They showed a balance plummeting from $50,000 to near zero over the course of 3 months, followed by a series of returned checks and overdraft notices. His bespoke sneaker import business had been a spectacular failure. Then I found the draft of a letter. It was in my mother's handwriting, full of crossed-out lines and angry revisions. "Leo, your father and I cannot keep doing this. This is the last time. You are bleeding us dry. You have a sister who works, who saves, who is responsible. What will be left for her?" The paragraph was furiously crossed out, but I could still read it. The final version of the letter wasn't there. She must have thought better of it or been convinced not to send it. And then at the very bottom of the folder, I found the ledger. It was a single sheet of paper, a printout of an email. It was from my mother's email address, sent to Leo, dated just 2 weeks before the new will was signed. The subject line was simple: the conditions. The email was short, brutal, and utterly damning. "Leo," it read, "your father has agreed to the loan. The bank has approved it. But this is the end. There will be no more. In exchange for this, and to ensure your future is secure as you requested, we will be making adjustments to our final arrangements. Amelia is practical. She has her career and her own savings. She will be fine. You are the one who needs to be protected. The new will is being drawn up by Mr. Sterling next week. We are doing this for you. Do not ask us for anything ever again." I read it 3 times, the words burning themselves into my memory. Amelia is practical. She will be fine. It wasn't a punishment. It was a calculation. I wasn't their daughter in that moment. I was a line item they could afford to zero out. They had consolidated all their emotional and financial investment into their failing asset, Leo, and written me off as a sunk cost. The cold, businesslike cruelty of it took my breath away. This was proof. This was the undue influence, the emotional and financial pressure he had put on them, laid bare in my mother's own words.
I carefully placed the email back in the folder, along with the other documents. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't pounding with grief. A profound, chilling calm had settled over me. The hurt was still there, a deep tectonic ache, but it was now overlaid with something else, the crystalline clarity of purpose. They had handed me a bill for their betrayal. I had just found the receipt. The paper felt brittle in my hands, a physical artifact of a digital betrayal. The email wasn't just a smoking gun. It was a verdict delivered from beyond the grave, written in my mother's deceptively gentle prose. I read the words again, letting the poison seep in, cauterizing the last remnants of my grief. "We know you'll be fine. You're the practical one." It was the epitaph they had written for my loyalty. In their carefully constructed family business, I wasn't a daughter. I was an asset with a high tolerance for liability. The cavernous silence of my parents' study, a room I had always associated with my father's quiet authority and the scent of leather and lemon polish, now felt like a mausoleum. The ghosts here weren't my parents. They were the specters of 1,000 small sacrifices I had made, the countless times I had been the fixer, the responsible one, the foundation for a pyramid built to elevate my brother. And now, the architects of that pyramid had handed me a bill for its construction. My movements became methodical, the shock solidifying into a glacial calm. I smoothed the wrinkled paper on the mahogany desk, its polished surface reflecting my grim face. I took out my phone, my hand steady, and photographed the document. Every word, every pixel was a nail for the coffin I was about to build for their narrative. I attached the image to a new email, the recipient line already filled with Jessica Croft's name. The subject was simple: evidence. The body of the email was even simpler. They put it in writing. I hit send. The soft whoosh of the email departing landed in the silent room like a stone dropped down a deep, dark well. I didn't wait for a reply. I folded the original email, slid it into the hidden folder, and placed the folder back inside the false bottom of the desk drawer. It was my insurance policy, tucked away in the heart of enemy territory. Leaving the house, I didn't look back. It was no longer my home. It was a crime scene. My apartment, with its clean lines and minimalist decor, was a sanctuary of order in the chaos of my life. It was a space I had curated myself, paid for myself, a testament to the very practicality my parents had weaponized against me. I had just finished brewing a pot of strong black coffee when my phone buzzed. It was Jessica. "Amelia," she said, her voice devoid of pleasantries. It was the voice of a shark that had scented blood in the water. "I've reviewed the email. Where did you find this?" "In a hidden compartment in my father's desk, a file labeled Leo Contingencies." A low whistle came down the line. Contingencies? They knew he was a walking disaster. "Amelia, this is it. This is everything." "I thought so," I said, my own voice sounding distant, detached. The emotional fury had burned itself out, leaving behind a cold, hard resolve. "What does it do for us?" "What does it do?" Jessica's laugh was a sharp, dangerous sound. "It blows their entire case out of the water. Sterling and your family have been painting you as the bitter, unstable daughter, and Leo as the bereft, sensitive soul who needed protecting. This email, in your mother's own words, proves intent. It proves they knowingly and deliberately structured their estate to enrich their son at your direct expense. It's a roadmap of their financial abuse." I walked to the window, looking down at the city lights beginning to flicker on against the bruised twilight sky. They called it being practical. The court will call it undue influence and unconscionable conduct, Jessica snapped back. Your brother's constant financial crises created the pressure, and your parents, with the help of a duplicitous lawyer, created this elegant solution. This isn't just a smoking gun, Amelia. This is the whole arms factory. It gives us grounds for an immediate ex parte injunction. The legal jargon, which once would have intimidated me, now sounded like a beautiful symphony. An injunction to do what? To to freeze the estate, every account, every asset. Leo won't be able to touch another dime until this is settled. We file first thing in the morning. He's probably been liquidating assets since the moment the will was read. This will turn off the tap, hard." She paused. "This also puts Mr. Sterling in an incredibly precarious position. He drafted a will based on what is now demonstrably false pretenses presented to you. He's not just their lawyer anymore. He's a material witness and potentially a party to the deception." I felt a sliver of dark satisfaction. Sterling, with his smug smile and condescending tone. "Good. I need your final go-ahead, Amelia. Once we file this, the war begins in earnest. There's no going back. Their response will be swift and ugly." I thought of Leo's too-sharp suit, of Aunt Carol's saccharine disappointment, of my father's signature on the HELOC that had funded his son's fecklessness. I thought of my mother's words, "She will be fine." "Jessica," I said, my voice as cold and clear as glass, "burn it all down." The call came less than 24 hours later. The injunction had landed. The family's financial pipeline, the one that flowed directly to Leo, had been severed. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew who it would be. "Hello?"
"Darling, it's Aunt Carol." Her voice was a strained, syrupy mess, the panic barely masked beneath a veneer of concern. "There seems to have been some sort of horrible mistake. Your brother's accounts are frozen. The bank is saying there's a legal hold. You wouldn't know anything about this, would you?" I sat down at my small dining table, which had become my war room. "It's not a mistake, Aunt Carol. It's an injunction." There was a sharp intake of breath. "An injunction? What on earth are you talking about? This is a private family matter. What have you done?" "I've hired a lawyer," I stated, keeping my tone perfectly level. "She's contesting the will on the grounds of undue influence." "Undue influence?" Her voice climbed, the saccharine coating dissolving to reveal the shrill indignation beneath. "Amelia, you are being hysterical. You're dragging your parents' good name through the mud, all because you're feeling a little sensitive." Sensitive was never my designated role, Carol. Practical was. And practically speaking, being left with a $74,000 debt while my brother inherits nearly $1 million is grounds for a lawsuit. "This is about Leo's business ventures, isn't it?" she hissed. "Your parents wanted to give him a fresh start. They knew you were capable, that you could handle it. It was a compliment." It was the same twisted logic from my mother's email, polished and redeployed as a weapon of guilt. The old Amelia would have buckled. The new Amelia leaned into the fight. It wasn't a compliment. It was a bill for a lifetime of propping him up. "The family business is closed, Carol. I'm no longer accepting liability for the golden child's failures." "How dare you?" she shrieked, and in the background I could hear the low, rumbling murmur of Uncle Robert. The enforcers were assembled. "After everything your parents did for you, they loved you. This will destroy your brother." "No," I said, the word landing with the finality of a gavel strike. "My parents destroyed him by never letting him fail. They destroyed me by never letting me rest. This isn't destroying Leo. This is holding him accountable for the first time in his life." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "Tell me, Carol, does he look as handsome when he's not wearing a suit paid for by a loan in my name?" The sputter on the other end of the line was my reward. You have no idea what you've started, Amelia. You are tearing this family apart." A cold, unfamiliar smile touched my lips. I looked out my window at the vast, indifferent city I had conquered on my own terms. "No, Aunt Carol," I said softly before disconnecting the call. "You have no idea what I'm finishing." The silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with the hum of my own power. The board of directors had been served notice. The foundation they had taken for granted was now suing them for damages. The bill for my lifetime of service was coming due, and this time I was the one holding the ledger. The line went dead. The silence that rushed in to fill the void was absolute, a heavy blanket in the small, quiet space of my apartment. For a moment, I just stood there, the phone a cooling piece of plastic in my hand.
Aunt Carol's shrill indignation still echoed in my ear, a ghost of the life I had just decisively amputated. In her world, I had committed the ultimate sin. I had refused to perform my designated role. I had returned the bill for a lifetime of loyalty, unpaid. A slow, cold smile touched my lips. It felt foreign, like a muscle I hadn't used in years. They didn't expect this. They had built their entire family structure, a carefully constructed pyramid with Leo at the gilded peak and me as the load-bearing foundation, on the assumption of my compliance. They had mistaken my strength for servitude. My apartment, once just a refuge from my family's endless needs, had transformed. It was no longer a sanctuary, it was a war room. The neat stacks of files on my dining table weren't just paperwork, they were munitions. The laptop glowing in the corner was my command center. My parents had trained me my entire life to be the fixer, the practical one who managed the messy details they and Leo couldn't be bothered with. It was a cruel irony that the very skills they had exploited were now being turned against them. They had handed their enemy a sword and taught her how to wield it. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a calendar notification. Video call, J. Croft. I made a fresh cup of coffee, the bitter aroma grounding me, and sat at my table. When Jessica's face appeared on my screen, she wasn't smiling. She looked like a general surveying her most promising field commander. Her expression was sharp, all business. I received a flurry of emails last night and this morning, she began, her voice crisp. One from a very flustered Mr. Sterling, informing me that his client, Mr. Leo Gable, is experiencing extreme emotional and financial distress due to the injunction. Another was a carbon copy of a message sent to you from your aunt, which I'll be filing as further evidence of witness intimidation and undue influence. She called me too, I said, my voice even. I told her I was finishing what they started. A flicker of something, respect, maybe even admiration, crossed Jessica's face. Good, let them panic. Their panic will make them sloppy. Now, for the next steps, they're going to fight the injunction hard. Sterling will file a motion to dissolve it, and we'll have a hearing. He'll argue that our claim is frivolous and that you're acting out of spite. He will try to paint you as a vindictive, money-grubbing daughter. The words should have stung. A month ago, they would have shattered me. Now, they landed with the dull thud of spent ammunition. Let him, I replied. It's the only play they have. They can't argue the facts, so they'll attack my character. Exactly, Jessica confirmed, which is why we need to be aggressive. We are now in the discovery phase. This is where the war is truly fought, Amelia. It's not in the courtroom theatrics, it's in the paper trail. I'm serving them with a set of interrogatories and a request for production of documents. I want every bank statement, every loan application, every email and text message between your parents, Leo, and Sterling for the past 5 years. She leaned closer to the camera. I want to know where every single dollar went. We know about the Hellock for the tech startup. What else was there? A car? Gambling debts? Lavish vacations? We're not just proving undue influence. We're building a comprehensive financial malfeasance. We're going to hand the judge a ledger so damning there will be no other possible conclusion. They'll hide things, I said, the thought a certainty, not a question. Of course they will, Jessica shot back. And we'll subpoena the banks directly. We'll subpoena Leo's business partners. We will depose Leo, your aunt and uncle, and Mr. Sterling. We will put them in a room under oath and ask them questions they can't afford to answer truthfully. She paused, her eyes locking onto mine through the screen. This part will be ugly, Amelia. They will say things designed to unmake you. Are you ready for that? I thought of my mother's email. She's practical. She'll be fine. I thought of Leo's smug smile at the will reading. I thought of my father, who saw me not as a daughter, but as a line of credit. I'm not the one who should be worried about being unmade, I said. 2 days later, the first volley from their side arrived. It wasn't a phone call or a desperate text. It was a cold, formal document emailed from Jessica, a PDF file that felt heavier than its kilobytes. Motion to dissolve temporary injunction and request for sanctions. I read it, my coffee growing cold beside me. Sterling's language was a masterclass in polished duplicity. He framed the injunction as a malicious and frivolous action brought by a disgruntled heir. He painted me as emotionally unstable, lashing out in grief and jealousy. He claimed Leo was the rightful and intended beneficiary, a sensitive soul who had always been the focus of his parents' financial planning, while I had been the self-sufficient and independent one. He twisted my competence into a weapon against me. But the most audacious part was the request for sanctions. They were asking the court to force me to pay for Leo's legal fees and for the damages caused by his temporary inability to access his fortune. They weren't just defending, they were demanding I pay for the inconvenience of my own defiance. I read the words, and I didn't feel hurt. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. It was a clean, clarifying fire. This document was the perfect encapsulation of my family's philosophy. Their comfort was paramount, and my resources, financial, emotional, moral, were the fuel to be burned to maintain it. They hadn't just handed me a bill for my loyalty. They were now trying to charge me interest. I closed the laptop and walked to the window, looking down at the anonymous city streets. They thought this would intimidate me. They thought legal jargon and character assassination would make me crumble, just as Aunt Carol's saccharine guilt trips were supposed to. They still didn't understand. I wasn't the dutiful daughter anymore. I was a creditor, and their entire estate was collateral. My mind, the one they called practical, started working. The HELOC, the failed business, Venture Capital Partners LLC. That was the name on the loan document, a generic, meaningless name designed to sound important. On a whim, I went back to my laptop and typed the name into the state's public business registry. The filing was public record. Leo was listed as the managing member. No surprise there. I scrolled down the document, my eyes scanning the dry, bureaucratic fields. Registered agent, Leo Gable. Principal office address, a P.O. box. And then I saw it. A section for initial organizers. There were 2 names, Leo Gable, and a name that made the air freeze in my lungs, Robert Miller. Uncle Robert, my father's brother, the silent, imposing man who had stood beside Aunt Carol at the lawyer's office, his face a stony mask of disapproval. The man who had simply watched as his wife berated me, whose silence was a form of consent. He wasn't just a passive enforcer of the family hierarchy. He was a business partner. He was financially entangled in the very venture that had created the debt my parents had tried to saddle me with. My breath hitched. It wasn't just my parents protecting their golden child. This was a wider conspiracy. Uncle Robert's presence, his silent judgment, it wasn't about family loyalty. It was about protecting his own financial interests. He had a stake in Leo's success, and therefore, a stake in seeing me absorb the losses. The entire family structure wasn't just a pyramid, it was a cartel. I stared at the screen, the pieces clicking into place with sickening precision. The family meetings, the pressure, the united front. It wasn't just about upholding a toxic tradition. It was about covering up a shared dirty secret. The $74,000 debt wasn't just Leo's failure. It was Uncle Robert's too. And they had all decided as a board of directors that I would be the one to bail them out. My hands were steady as I picked up my phone. I didn't hesitate. I dialed Jessica Croft. She answered on the second ring. "Jessica," I said, my voice sharp, stripped of all emotion save for a cold, hard certainty. I could hear the rustle of papers on her end. "What is it?" "The business Leo's HELOC was for," I said, my eyes still locked on the screen. "He had a partner, an initial organizer on the LLC filing." I took a breath, the name a stone on my tongue. It was my uncle, Robert. Silence. Then a slow, low whistle from Jessica's end. "Well, well, well," she said, her voice laced with the predatory thrill of a hunter who had just found a fresh trail of blood. "No," I said, looking at the name on the screen. "Robert Miller." The foundation wasn't just cracked, it was rotten to the core. "It's a RICO case." The document felt heavier than paper. It felt like a tombstone, etched not with a name, but with a number. The final, damning piece of the equation. Robert Gable, partner. My uncle, the silent, hulking figure who had stood in the background of my life, a monolith of quiet judgment, was not just an enforcer of the family's toxic hierarchy. He was a stakeholder. The cavernous silence of my parents' study pressed in on me. The smell of old books and my father's faint lingering pipe tobacco, once a scent of comfort, now smelled like deceit. I looked at the signature line on the partnership agreement for Leo's Folly, Inc., as I'd come to call it. My uncle's rigid, angry script was unmistakable. It was dated 18 months ago, just before the HELOC was taken out. It all clicked into place with the cold, satisfying snap of a lock. Uncle Robert's presence at the lawyer's office wasn't just familial support, it was risk management. His stony silence as Mr. Sterling read the will wasn't stoicism, it was the tense quiet of an investor watching a crooked bet pay off. He and my parents had made a calculated decision. When Leo's venture inevitably collapsed, they wouldn't absorb the loss, they would transfer it to me. The family wasn't a pyramid built on my foundational support. It was a shell corporation designed to funnel assets to its CEO, Leo, while hiding liabilities in a forgotten subsidiary, me. I had just found the company ledger. My hands were steady as I pulled out my phone. I didn't just photograph the document. I photographed the page before it and the page after. I documented the file it came from, the drawer it was in, the locked desk that had held it. I was building a case, brick by painstaking brick. The fixer was finally fixing the right problem. The house no longer felt like a home stripped of its life, furniture covered in white sheets like ghosts of a happier past. It felt like a crime scene. I was no longer a grieving daughter. I was a forensic accountant, and I had just uncovered a conspiracy. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Jessica Croft's voice was sharp, cutting through the speaker on my laptop with the clean, satisfying sound of a guillotine blade. We were on a secure video call, my apartment's living room transformed into a war room. Papers were no longer in neat stacks, but spread across my coffee table in strategic clusters, connected by lines of string like a detective's evidence board. "That's what this is, Amelia," she continued, a thin, predatory smile on her lips. "This is no longer just a case of undue influence or a morally bankrupt will. The partnership agreement with Robert Gable changes the game entirely." I had emailed her the photos the moment I returned to my sanctuary. I had watched her on screen as she examined them, her expression shifting from professional interest to a kind of fierce intellectual hunger. I had hired her for that look. "It provides motive for a third party," I said, my voice a polished drone that mirrored hers. Robert stood to lose his investment. The will was his insurance policy. "Precisely," Jessica confirmed, "and it implicates Sterling up to his bespoke eyeballs. As the family's lawyer, he would have been aware of this partnership. He likely drafted the documents. His failure to disclose Robert's conflict of interest at the will reading is a massive ethical breach, bordering on professional misconduct. He wasn't an impartial officer of the court. He was an accessory." The validation was a cold fire in my veins.
I had spent my life being told I was overthinking things, that I was too analytical, that I should just feel more. But my analysis was my weapon. My ability to see the structure beneath the emotion was my greatest strength. So, what's our next move? I asked. We file a motion to add Robert Gable as a party to the suit, she said, her fingers flying across her keyboard. We'll subpoena all communications between him, your parents, Leo, and Sterling for the last 2 years. We'll depose him. A man like that who hides behind silence? He'll crumble under direct questioning. His entire power base is intimidation, not intellect. She paused, leaning into her camera. But before we do that, we let them sweat. The asset freeze is in place. Leo can't touch a dime. Robert is exposed. They're cornered, and cornered people do stupid things. Her words were prophetic. As if on cue, my phone, lying face up on the table, lit up. The name pulsed on the screen, a beacon of passive aggression. Aunt Carol. Jessica saw my expression. "Speak of the devil's sister-in-law," she murmured. "Answer it. Put it on speaker. Let's hear what the propaganda minister has to say." I took a breath, my heart a steady, heavy drum. This was it, the first direct engagement since I had declared war. I swiped to answer, the familiar saccharine voice filling the room. "Amelia, darling, thank goodness, I've been so worried." "Hello, Carol," I said. The name landed in the silent room like a stone. No aunt. The honorific had been revoked. There was a brief, almost imperceptible pause. "I was just calling to see how you were, this whole situation. It's all just so unpleasant. Your parents would be devastated to see the family fighting like this." The old Amelia would have buckled under the weight of that guilt. The new Amelia recognized it for the weapon it was. "Which part do you think they'd find most unpleasant, Carol?" I asked, my voice cool and even. "The part where they conspired to saddle me with their son's debt, or the part where I found out?" Jessica's smile widened. She gave me a slow, approving nod. Carol's gasp was a theatrical masterpiece of shrill indignation. "Amelia, how can you speak of your parents that way? They loved you. They just knew you were the practical one, the strong one." "Practical was their code word for workhorse," I countered, leaning back on my sofa. "And strong meant I could bear a burden they were too weak or too biased to place where it belonged. I'm done being strong for them. I'm being strong for me now." "You're being selfish," she snapped, the mask of concern slipping to reveal the sneering contempt beneath. "Leo is a sensitive soul. This kind of pressure, it's not good for him. You're freezing his inheritance over a simple misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding. I have the emails, Carol, the ones where they call me their financial solution. But I'm sure you know all about that. You were always part of the board of directors, weren't you? Upholding the family's mission statement." A choked, sputtering sound came through the phone. She was flustered, losing control of the narrative she had spent a lifetime spinning. It was time to sever the final thread. "I have to go, Carol," I said, my tone shifting from cold to glacial. "I have a lot of work to do. But before I do, could you pass along a message to your husband for me?" Silence. "Tell Robert that his time of hiding in plain sight is over. Tell him I found the partnership agreement for Leo's failed startup. Tell him I know he was at the will reading not to mourn his brother, but to protect his investment." The silence on the other end of the line was no longer tactical. It was absolute, a vacuum of pure shock. I could picture her perfectly, her hand clutching her pearls, her face pale, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. I pressed on, my voice low and deliberate. "Tell him his financial arrangements are now a matter of legal record. Tell Leo the Bank of Amelia is permanently closed for business.
And while you're at it, you can tell Mr. Sterling that I'm looking forward to discussing his fiduciary duties with the State Bar Association. This isn't a family squabble anymore. It's a business liquidation, and I'm the one holding the demolition orders." Without waiting for a response, I ended the call. The silence that returned to my apartment was different. It wasn't empty. It was filled with the immense, solid weight of my own power. I looked at Jessica on the screen. Her expression was one of profound professional respect. "Well," she said, her voice laced with admiration, "the propaganda minister has been officially decommissioned." I looked around my war room at the evidence strung up like battle plans. I hadn't just been handed a bill for a lifetime of loyalty. I had been handed a weapon, and I was finally learning how to use it. The grief was still there, a hollow ache in my chest, but it was now surrounded by a thick wall of cold, hard rage. I wasn't the foundation of their corrupt structure anymore. I was the demolition crew, and I was just getting started. The name on the incorporation document, Robert Sterling, was a brand burned onto my retinas. It wasn't just a name, it was a key, unlocking a room I never knew existed in the carefully constructed pyramid of my family. For years, I had believed the structure was simple. My parents at the apex, Leo the gilded capstone, and me the broad, thankless foundation holding everything up. Now I saw the truth. There were other architects, other stakeholders in the grand project of my ruin. Uncle Robert, the silent partner, Aunt Carol, the public relations enforcer. They were a board of directors, and I had just uncovered the minutes from a meeting where they'd all voted to liquidate my life to cover their own bad investment. The fog of grief, a heavy, cloying blanket I'd been suffocating under for weeks, finally burned away. In its place was the crystalline clarity of rage. It was a cold, clean fury, not the hot, messy anger of a tantrum, but the focused, efficient energy of a turbine. The fixer had a new project, the most important one of her life. My apartment, once a sanctuary from the family's suffocating expectations, had already become my war room. The coffee table was a controlled chaos of documents, the duplicitous will, the HELOC statements, the printouts of my mother's damning emails, and now the business filings for Leo's failed venture. I picked up my phone, my movements precise, devoid of the hesitation that had plagued me for a lifetime. Jessica Croft answered on the second ring, her voice as sharp as a shard of glass. "Amelia, I was just reviewing the preliminary asset freeze. Sterling is already filing a motion to contest. He's fast, I'll give him that." "He's about to be busy with something else," I said. My voice was unnaturally steady, a polished drone that didn't sound like my own. "I found something. Leo's business, the one my parents' HELOC paid for, it wasn't just his." I could hear the faint sound of typing stop on her end. "Go on." "He had a partner. The articles of incorporation list a co-founder, my uncle, Robert Sterling." The silence on the other end of the line was profound. It wasn't the silence of confusion. It was the silence of a predator that has just caught a new, more promising scent on the wind. "Robert," Jessica repeated, the name flat and hard. "The silent, intimidating one from the meeting?" "The very same. His wife, my Aunt Carol, has been leading the pressure campaign to get me to pay the debt." "Jesus," Jessica breathed, the single word laced with a lawyer's avaricious delight. "Amelia, this changes the game entirely. This isn't a simple, albeit cruel, inheritance dispute anymore. This is coordinated. This is conspiracy to commit fraud." The legal term landed in the quiet of my apartment like a stone, sending ripples through my resolve. Conspiracy. It was the perfect word for the suffocating, unspoken alliances that had governed my entire life. They used my parents' grief and their pathological need to protect Leo, I continued, piecing it together out loud. Robert let his nephew be the face of the failure, hid his own involvement, and then conspired with my parents to create a new will that would use me, the practical one, to clean up his financial mess. They weren't just leaving me a debt, they were fraudulently transferring a business loss from my uncle to me. And your parents were either complicit or criminally negligent, Jessica finished. Either way, Leo, Robert, and Carol are all accessories. Mr. Sterling, the lawyer, too, if he knew the full picture when he drafted that will, which he almost certainly did. This is a house of cards, Amelia, and you just found the rotten beam holding the whole thing up. So what's the next move? I asked. We could go straight to the DA, she said, but a criminal case can be slow and unpredictable. The threat of it, however, is a much more powerful negotiating tool. We need to get them to incriminate themselves. We need to corner them. A grim smile was evident in her voice. It's time to call a family meeting. On your terms. The phone call to Aunt Carol was a masterclass in controlled warfare. Amelia, dear, she answered, her voice oozing its usual saccharine disappointment. I was just thinking about you. I do hope you're reconsidering your position. This unpleasantness is so beneath you. Aunt Carol, I said, cutting through her preamble with a blade of pure ice. I need to see you and Uncle Robert and Leo. There was a slight pause. Well, I'm not sure, Robert. It's not a request, I stated. The words felt foreign and exhilarating. I have some new information regarding the estate and Leo's business. Be at the house tomorrow, noon, all of you. The shift in her tone was immediate, the honeyed sweetness curdling into shrill indignation. Now you listen here, young lady. Who do you think you are, summoning us? I'm the person your husband and my brother tried to swindle out of $74,000. Noon. Don't be late. I hung up before she could respond, my heart hammering against my ribs, not with fear, but with a wild, triumphant power. I was no longer reacting. I was directing. The next day, I walked into my parents' house for the first time since the will reading. It was no longer a place of childhood memories. It was enemy territory. The air was stale and heavy with the ghosts of unspoken truths. The furniture was still covered in white sheets, like a congregation of silent, shrouded witnesses. I didn't turn on any lights, letting the weak midday sun filter through the dusty windows, striping the living room in bars of gray. This wasn't a home anymore. It was a courtroom, and I was the prosecution. They arrived together, a united front of entitlement and intimidation. Leo, in a suit that was too sharp for a Tuesday afternoon, a smug smile plastered on his face as if he'd already won. Aunt Carol, her face a brittle mask of forced concern, her hand clutching a pearl necklace at her throat. And Uncle Robert, a hulking, silent presence, his expression as impenetrable as granite. They stood awkwardly in the foyer, expecting me to offer them a seat, some coffee, some semblance of the niece I used to be. I didn't move from my position in the center of the living room. No need to get comfortable, I said. This won't take long. Leo scoffed. Look, Leah, if this is about the money again, we told you. Just sign the papers. Be a good sister. I was always a good sister, I replied, my gaze locking onto his. I was a good daughter. I was a good niece. I was the family's foundation, the one you all stood on. But foundations crack when the weight becomes too much. I let the metaphor hang in the oppressive quiet. I saw a flicker of confusion in Leo's eyes. Aunt Carol's smile tightened. I've been doing some reading, I continued, my voice calm and measured as I began to pace slowly, like a lawyer before a jury. About the HELOC, about the business it was used to fund. Leo's Folly, I think Dad called it. An artisanal kombucha company. Very on brand for you, Leo. High concept,
0 profit. "It was a solid idea," he blustered. "The market just wasn't ready." "Perhaps," I said, stopping to face my uncle. "Or perhaps it was just poorly managed." But the most interesting thing I found wasn't in the profit and loss statements. It was in the incorporation documents. "Tell me, Uncle Robert, how did you enjoy the kombucha business?" The effect was instantaneous and profound. Leo went pale. Aunt Carol let out a tiny strangled gasp. But the real prize was Uncle Robert. For the first time in my life, I saw a crack in his stoic, patriarchal facade. A muscle jumped in his jaw. His eyes, for a split second, widened in pure, unadulterated panic. He didn't have to say a word. I had just found the ledger, and his name was right at the top. "She's lying. She's making it up," Leo stammered, looking frantically between his aunt and uncle for a lifeline. "Am I?" I held up my phone, the screen displaying the document with Robert Sterling's name highlighted. "It's all public record. You were a 50% partner, which means half of the debt that my parents absorbed, the debt they then passed on exclusively to me, was yours." "Amelia, this is a terrible misunderstanding," Aunt Carol began, her voice regaining its venomous sweetness. "Your uncle was only trying to help Leo, to guide him."
It was a gesture of family support. "A gesture?" I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that echoed in the silent room. "You call conspiracy to commit fraud a gesture? You all stood by while my parents rewrote their will. You knew they were saddling me with a debt that belonged to you, Robert. You let them do it to protect your own assets. You handed me a bill for a lifetime of my loyalty." I stopped pacing and stood before them, the three of them backed against the entryway like cornered animals. "This is what is going to happen," I announced, the voice of the fixer now fully in command. "You will go to Mr. Sterling's office tomorrow. You will have the debt of $74,000 paid in full from the estate's liquid assets before it ever touches my credit score. You will then instruct him to draw up a new distribution, honoring my parents' original will, a 50-50 split of all remaining assets. And one more thing." I paused, letting them absorb the terms. Leo looked like he was about to be sick. "The house," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "The house is mine. You will sign it over, free and clear. Consider it a receipt for your betrayal." "You're insane," Leo spat. "We'll never agree to that." "Yes, you will," I said, my gaze sweeping over all three of them. "Because if you don't, my lawyer, Jessica Croft, will be filing a report with the district attorney's office for conspiracy to commit fraud, with evidence implicating every single one of you, including Mr. Sterling, for knowingly drafting a fraudulent document. You think a contested will is messy? Try navigating a multi-defendant criminal investigation. I wonder how investors feel about partnering with men facing felony charges. I wonder how the old money set feels about that kind of scandal." Silence, utter, deafening silence. The smugness was gone. The condescension was gone. All that remained was the raw, ugly face of their fear. I had turned their own system against them. The language of finance, of consequences, of reputation. It was the only language they truly understood. I picked up my purse from a sheet-covered armchair. "You have 24 hours to make the call. I'd advise you to be practical." I walked past them, out the front door, and into the bright, cold light of day. I didn't look back. The ghosts in that house were theirs to deal with now. I was finally exercising my own. The silence that followed was a physical thing, a heavy, suffocating blanket woven from shock and fury. I had just detonated a bomb in the center of their world, and they were staring at the crater where their smug certainty used to be. The living room, once their seat of power, was now a battlefield, and I had just dictated the terms of surrender. Aunt Carol was the first to break. A strangled gasp escaped her lips. Her face, usually a mask of saccharine condescension, now a blotchy canvas of outrage. How dare you?" she sputtered, her voice a shrill, cracking whip. "Threaten your own family after everything we've done for you?" "Done for me?" I repeated, the words tasting like ash. I kept my voice low, a polished drone designed to cut through her hysteria. "You mean co-sign my life away to pay for his mistakes? Hand me a bill for a lifetime of loyalty?"
"That's what you've done for me, Carol, and I'm here to return the favor." Leo, who had been frozen in a state of pugnacious disbelief, finally surged to his feet. His expensive suit suddenly looked too big for him, his face pale and clammy. "You're bluffing," he sneered, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "You wouldn't. The scandal, it would ruin the family name." I met his gaze, my own as cold and hard as the marble fireplace behind him. "What family name, Leo? The one you tarnished with a failed business? The one you leveraged to defraud your own sister? That name is already an asset you've liquidated. The only thing you have left to lose is your freedom. 24 hours. Uncle Robert, the monolithic silent partner, said nothing. He simply watched me, his eyes dark and calculating. In them, I saw no familial warmth, no flicker of remorse. I saw a businessman weighing risk and liability. He wasn't looking at his niece. He was looking at an unforeseen expense, a catastrophic line item on a balance sheet he thought was settled. In his silence, I heard the frantic whirring of gears as he calculated the cost of my demolition. It was the most honest communication he had ever offered me. I didn't wait for another round of sputtering indignation. I had delivered my ultimatum. The next move was theirs. I turned, my heels clicking with deliberate finality on the hardwood floor, and walked out the door without a backward glance. The cacophony of their outrage followed me down the stone path, but it sounded distant, like the frantic squawking of birds whose nest had just been raided. I didn't feel a shred of guilt. I felt the clean, sharp edge of justice. I had just handed them a receipt for their betrayal. My apartment, once a sanctuary, had become my war room. The city lights glittered beyond my window, a sprawling, indifferent galaxy. But my world had shrunk to the dimensions of this single high-stakes conflict. The 24-hour countdown I had imposed felt like a living entity in the room with me, its heartbeat the relentless tick of the clock on my wall. I spent the first few hours in a state of hyper-focused activity. I laid out every piece of evidence on my dining table: the copy of the new will, the printouts of the older versions, the damning email from my mother, the HELOC statements, and the corporate filings for Leo's defunct company with Uncle Robert's name listed as a silent partner. It was a mosaic of deceit, a carefully documented ledger of their conspiracy. I called Jessica Croft. "They're cornered," I told her, my voice steady. I relayed the events of the confrontation, the ultimatum, the specific terms. There was a pause on the other end, and then Jessica let out a low whistle. "Amelia, you went in there and launched a full-scale assault. Most clients I have to drag to the battlefield. You built a trebuchet and started flinging boulders." "Are the boulders big enough?" I asked, cutting to the chase. "Big enough to level the whole damn fortress," she confirmed, her tone shifting from impressed to all business. "A criminal fraud investigation is not a joke. It's public record. It's depositions under oath. It's forensic accountants crawling through every transaction they've ever made." For people like them, who live and die by their reputation, it's a death sentence. Sterling would be facing disbarment. Your uncle would be facing charges that could unravel his entire financial life. Leo? Well, Leo would finally have to face a consequence he couldn't charm his way out of. "So you think they'll fold?" I stated, not as a question. I think your Uncle Robert is currently on the phone with his own lawyer, who is telling him in no uncertain terms that you have him, and the rest of them, dead to rights. The choice isn't between winning and losing. It's between a private, costly surrender and a public, catastrophic annihilation. You didn't give them an off-ramp, Amelia. You gave them a choice between two different kinds of ruin. We discussed the mechanics. If they agreed, Jessica would draft the settlement agreement immediately. It would be airtight, irrevocable. The transfer of funds, the signing of the deed to the house, it would all be handled through her office. There would be no more family meetings, no more tearful, manipulative phone calls. From now on, our communication would be through lawyers. The family, as I had known it, was being formally dissolved. After the call, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a profound, hollow exhaustion. The hours stretched. 9 p.m. became midnight. Midnight became 3 a.m. I didn't sleep. I sat on my sofa, the table of evidence before me, and watched the clock. Every tick was a hammer blow against the foundation of the life I'd once had. I wasn't grieving them anymore. I was grieving the person I had been, the dutiful daughter, the loyal sister, the fixer who had allowed herself to be broken time and again in the service of a family that was a business, a pyramid scheme with me as its base. This fight wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming the years I had spent propping them up. It was about severing the co-signed loan on my own soul. The call came at 8:17 a.m. with just under 2 hours to spare on my deadline. I had been staring at my phone, willing it to ring, and when it finally buzzed against the cool surface of my coffee table, the sound landed in the silent room like a stone. The caller ID was a number I didn't recognize. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. I took a breath, marshaled the cold resolve I had worn like armor for the past several days, and answered. "Hello." There was a pause, filled with the static of a connection and a heavy, resentful silence. Then, a voice I had so rarely heard on the phone spoke. It was gravelly, devoid of emotion, stripped of all pretense. It was Uncle Robert. "We accept the terms." Just 4 words. Not an apology, not an explanation. It was the clipped, bitter language of capitulation. It was the sound of a king conceding the board to avoid being checkmated in front of the entire court. I remained silent, letting him sit with the weight of his surrender. I would not make this easy for him. I would not fill the space with false pleasantries. He cleared his throat, the sound rough and impatient. "Our lawyer will be in contact with yours this morning to arrange the transfer of funds and the signing of the documents. The house, it's yours." He said the word yours like it was a curse. "And the debt?" I asked, my voice flat. A longer pause. I could practically hear him grinding his teeth. "The debt will be cleared from the estate before the division of the remaining assets, as you stipulated." "Good," I said. The word was a period at the end of a very long, very painful sentence. "Amelia," he began, and for a fleeting second, I thought he might attempt a plea, a justification, some pathetic appeal to a familial bond he had helped incinerate. But he stopped himself. The moment passed. The transaction was complete. "That is all." The line went dead. I lowered the phone from my ear and looked at the black screen. I didn't feel the triumphant elation I had expected. I didn't feel joy. I felt a vast, quiet emptiness. The war was over. I had won. The enemy had surrendered unconditionally. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the waking city. The sun was glinting off the glass of distant skyscrapers. For my entire life, my parents, my brother, my aunt and uncle, they had been the architects of my world, building the walls, setting the boundaries, deciding my value. Now, their structure was in ruins. It's over, I thought. But as I watched the traffic begin to move on the streets below, a new thought took its place, clear and certain. It wasn't over.
It was just the beginning. I finally had the foundation to myself, and I could build whatever I wanted.